Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle. Now, as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and editor and columnist for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. Now, as we record this is day 220 since Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, since the start of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And what we've been seeing over the past several days is a very, very big flare-up of clashes, again, in areas where the Israeli army months ago said, it's clear, Hamas has been defeated. Let's not forget that the Israeli army has been saying for the past 3-4 months maybe that the last 2 Hamas battalions are in Rafah. That's why we need to go into Rafah, where 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering. This is where total victory. We all know what they've been saying. Not the case at all, because now you have fighting in Gaza City, some fighting in Khan Yunis, very, very strong fighting in the Jabalia refugee camp, which is north of Gaza City. And you have, again, the mass displacement of Palestinians, because also fighting raging in Rafah.
I think there was a UN tweet yesterday or something that said about 150,000 Palestinians had left.
Yeah, so it's somewhere there, right? You've seen like them just leaving by the thousands, obviously, trying to safeguard their own lives. Where are they being pushed to? They're being pushed to the sea. They keep saying, this safe zone near the coast, or this little tent city in Khan Yunis. But from the north to the south, Palestinians are being pushed to the sea. And what's at the sea? The U.S. built pier, the temporary pier, which is soon to be done. That's what they're saying. So, again, we've talked about this before. We mentioned it. We also have articles discussing this by some of our columnists, that this pier that the U.S. is building seems more of a tool to facilitate the mass displacement of Palestinians out of the Strip than to actually bring in any aid. So is that what we're seeing now?
For decades, Israelis have lamented, oh, woe is us. The Arabs want to drive Jews into the sea. And we're literally seeing the opposite happening. People have suspected for some time and warned for some time that the pier may be an exit ramp to transport Palestinians out of Gaza. This is conjecture at best. We really don't know. I don't see how that can happen. One of the, early on in the war, when we were looking for red lines, what is the resistance axis red lines? One of those red lines that was somehow conveyed, was that if the resistance was significantly depleted in Gaza, or if Gazans were pushed out of Gaza, that would constitute a red line in which other members of the Axis would get directly involved in, to stop that, to preempt and prevent that. It's been a long time since those days and those discussion points. I think in terms of the, here's an interesting tidbit. The Cradle was provided information about 2 weeks before Joe Biden announced at a State of the Union address, I think on March 7th or something, that the Americans would build a humanitarian pier to save Gazans. We were told that the U.S. is planning to build a pier to create a maritime corridor between Cyprus specifically and Gaza, which would be the only way to get aid in Gaza for the foreseeable future and potentially forevermore. Essential to this plan was completely blockading the Rafah border, the Egyptian border with Gaza, permanently, shuttering the Philadelphia corridor. Now, what's interesting is, then Biden says, oh, we're doing this for humanitarian reasons. Wait a few months, Palestinians in Gaza, while we build the pier. Forget the hundreds of trucks waiting in Rafah to enter Gaza, and forget the 5 or so Israeli border crossings into Gaza. But we're going to build this pier to save you all. This while the U.S. was transporting into Israel hundreds of tons of weapons to destroy Gaza, and now the U.S. is coming in, wait a few months for us to build a pier, and then we will introduce about 90 trucks a day, maybe scaling up to 150 trucks, 8 trucks a day, which is far, far below the hundreds of trucks that were needed even before the war, per day. So this is part of a U.S. strategy. I mean, we had got our information from a resistance axis, very strategically placed figure. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. But key to this information that we received was a further siege of Gaza, cutting off Gaza from Egypt, primarily because Israel wants a complete siege of Gaza, and because Israel and the Americans have long suspected that despite Egyptian efforts to build iron walls between the two territories, that weapons are coming to the Palestinian resistance through that border. Now, I just want to point out that you can very easily not build a pier and bring in goods from Cyprus, right? Create a maritime corridor between Cyprus and Ashkelon, the Israeli port of Ashkelon, right, near Tel Aviv. Because this port, this pier, the Israeli authorities will be checking the goods in Cyprus, and then when they arrive under the auspices of the U.S. military, Israelis will again be checking the goods, in Gaza. So why not just run that through Ashkelon? The other thing about the pier is it's right smack in the middle of Gaza, right? I mean, the famines in the north. What do they want? They want to drag people from the north and south to the middle. First, they told the Gazans in the north to move south. Then they're telling the people in the south to move north. They're ping-ponging these human beings around as though, this is, oh, no, but we're going to help you, It's maddening, and I think a lot more scrutiny has to be given to what the U.S.'s goals ultimately are in the area. Just want to point out that the U.S. has lost its footholds in the waterways of the Persian Gulf and surrounding have deteriorated since the Yemeni maritime operations against the war in Gaza. And so that plus the cutting off of Russian energy sources to Europe has had Western powers struggle and recalibrate to find other sources of energy. And the Eastern Mediterranean, sort of Northern Africa and then West Asia, has been critical for this, because we've had a lot of gas fields being discovered and developed in these areas. And a lot of this is stolen Palestinian gas. So the other thing about the maritime corridor that the U.S. wants to establish is it puts the American military right smack there, to safeguard this new territory that it's grabbed for itself. But it's also a violation of international law because Gaza is a territory, and Gazans did not invite the U.S. military in to establish a pier.
Yeah, well, that's also, what we discussed last week about the no boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And there was this idea that it would be UK forces. But then as we record this yesterday, David Cameron, Foreign Secretary, said it is not going to be UK troops, it's going to be military contractors that are going to be working. Because there was a warning by the resistance saying if UK troops are operating on Gaza, they're going to become legitimate military targets because in the end, they are here to help the Israeli occupation to the crimes that they are committing. And another thing I just want to mention briefly, because I don't think I think it's worth mentioning, is that aid has essentially stopped coming into Gaza. I mean, there's still like a few trucks trickling in, and the ones that are coming under attack by Israeli settlers. Just before we recorded this, I was looking at some videos of these settler groups, draping the Israeli flag, opening up bags of flour, destroying food. So, because Gaza is not just the bombs, it's not just the army, it's not just, this is, as we said, the famine, is the lack of drinking water, is the lack of hospitals. Today, the Israelis also ordered the evacuation of Kuwaiti hospital in Rafah, that they're sabotaging the entry of aid, these settler groups. And that would bring into question with the possibility of even bringing aid through an Israeli port, right? As you said, that would be the most logical way if they want to bring it through the sea, not build this pier that, according to estimates, is not even going to work well. There's still a lot of safety concerns about this because of weather conditions, because of the fact that it reminds me of this. Remember the energy sharing scheme that they offer for Lebanon when Iran, offered the electricity. The U.S. came in and said, no, we are going to help you. Lebanon's still waiting for that. But now this pier, it reminds me of that, of just something that the U.S. needs to do to put on the front of a newspaper and see, we're doing something.
But I don't think it's just that. I think there's a sort of geopolitical scheme behind this. It is Eastern Mediterranean. It is potentially helping Israel occupy Gaza forevermore, because you will have, for legitimate reasons, for humanitarian reasons, U.S. boots on the ground there. By the way, your point about contractors, U.S. military contractors are legitimate targets, in my view. I mean, first of all, these guys get to skirt U.S. laws in a way that the Pentagon's troops perhaps cannot. Okay, I mean, Blackwater. Think Blackwater and their activities in Iraq and Africa. So many theaters, But just it bears mentioning that Haaretz last week published a piece saying that U.S. military contractors were going to be contracted to safeguard the Rafah border, the Philadelphia corridor, the border with Egypt, right? I mean, the State Department and White House has said, no, we don't know anything about this. But, this is we're getting information early, basically. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, Gaza is going to be filled with safely, in one place, U.S. military troops, and then running amok in Gaza, U.S. military contractors. This cannot be allowed. And, they're also using the Netzarim corridor, the artificial corridor that the Israeli army created since October 7th to divide northern and southern Gaza. Now, this is an important point, because if the U.S. Military needs the Netzarim corridor as point of interest for its pure activity, its pure operation, that means maintaining the Netzarim corridor, dividing fundamentally the north and south of Gaza from each other. Let's not forget that any ceasefire agreement that will be agreed on by the Palestinian resistance will not accept any remaining Israeli troops in Gaza, right? The Israelis want that Netzarim corridor to remain. The U.S. will be there to ensure that it does, even if Israeli troops leave, because we need it for humanitarian aid. We need it for our siege of Gaza via the pier.
Indeed. First of all, we have to say that this port or pier is illegal because the U.S. took that decision alone.
Unilaterally.
Of course, no Palestinian was asked if Israel is allowed to build it there. And I think, in my opinion, this port or this pier is created or is being built to displace Palestinians, because I don't see any other role for this pier. As Sharmin said, first, between Israel and the Gaza Strip, there's 5 crossings. And between Gaza and Egypt, there's the Rafah crossing and Karim Abu Salim crossing. And Gaza already had a port. So why to build a port that cost $350 million? So why to pay $350 million just to get aid? And also, as Sharmin said, if they want to make a corridor, or the corridor will be between Cyprus and Gaza. Gaza and Cyprus, they are very close. In sea, you need just a few hours to arrive there. And by air, you need like 13 minutes. So no need for a pier for humanitarian aid. So I think they will try to displace the Palestinians. Now they are playing, not despite the war, the actual war that Israel is playing. I think now the U.S. is playing the psychological war. They are giving hope, and then they are removing the hope, and then they are giving hope. Eventually, they will try to let Gazans, they would tell them there's an option. You can go to Europe or to other places by the sea. And I think also Europe will be happy about that, because we know that the fertility rate in the EU countries is 1.4. And to maintain your population, your fertility rate must be 2.1. So they are very far from that. I think the EU will be happy to accept 1 million or 1.2 million refugees.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not in this climate with the economy dwindling.
I mean, if it was if it was Ukrainians, maybe. But you're talking about...
No, blonde hair, blue eye. Let's be honest.
Let's be also honest that they took more than 1 million Afghani and around 3 million
That was
Syrians.
before the Syrian conflict. The Syrian conflict blew the refugee issue wide open in Europe, brought in a bunch of right-wing parties and Brexits and Frexits and Grexit, talks. So
So,
think that
so you think Europe will be happy to like lose 20 million in the few 4 years?
what do you mean? First of
Their
all,
fertility rate is 1.4.
yeah,
The workforce is like this.
I don't think that they're depending on the war in Gaza to supply them with civilians.
They are. That's how they think.
No, because let's be honest, the plan has been to move Palestinians in Gaza, when discussed, to Arab countries like Iraq. We wrote an article about this. There's a long-term plan to displace Palestinians to Syria, to Jordan, to Egypt, to Lebanon, demographic reasons, and to Iraq as well. Another country where they have a majority Shia population. They like to, rejig those numbers in favor of Sunni.
As I see it, by time, first they announced or they still started to hint that they want to push them to Egypt, but Egypt didn't accept that. And just today, Egypt said, and they unleashed their media outlets and said, if any Palestinian cross the Rafah crossing, we will kill him. They said it. So let me continue. So when Egypt didn't allow that, or the West saw, we can't move them to the Sinai desert, there's other way. We can move them to Europe through the pier. There's no any excuse to build a pier except for...
One thing I just want to bring up about this, this idea, because there is a possibility that this is where this is going, but I just want to remind you, remind our listeners really, that what happened with the Afghani collaborators of the U.S. when they, tried to flee and they took out tens of thousands, I don't know, I forget the figure, but, a large chunk of Afghanis, they took them out. They didn't take them to the U.S. And these are people that helped them in their war effort, in their
100%.
They're still stuck in prisons in the UAE. They're still stuck in camps in other Southeast Asian countries. I think they're still, their applications in the U.S. they keep getting pushed back and getting pushed back. So there might be this effort to bring out Palestinians, but I don't think they're ever gonna go and see actually.
But why to take Afghanis? There's no Israel. There's no settlers that want your Afghani land to settle there. But in Gaza, they want all of Gaza, and the only option is to remove the Palestinians from Gaza, either to Egypt, which didn't work, and now they are building this pier, and they did it before. They did it in the 80s in Lebanon. They removed all the Palestinian fighters from Beirut to Cyprus, and from Cyprus they went to Tunis or Tunisia. And they did it in 1948, and they did it in 1967.
I think any European leader that agrees to do this it's going to immediately lose their next election.
Come on, let's be frank. You asked Bond, the Nord Stream, that cost billions of dollars from European money and from the German government. Nobody said anything. Nobody. There's
that
not
was
even
that,
a protest.
This is now literally when have
Nothing happened in this 1 year, Sharmin.
No, what are you talking about?
Sharmin, till now, Eurovision, or whatever Eurovision it's called.
Yes, Eurovision.
Eurovision, till now they have the Ukrainian flag and nobody said anything. Till now, if you watch Champions League, you have the Ukrainian flag. It's all about the narrative and what the West wants.
I should point out that Europeans are actually considering and have been considering removing Syrian refugees and sending them back home. These are points that are being discussed. You know what? I think you double down on this.
Yeah.
For you. But I think you're entirely wrong. The climate in Europe is awful, there's a reason Europe's moved more right-wing in terms of immigration, at least. And it comes from the contraction of economy. When economies contract, people get tribal. Yeah. And they're getting super tribal in Europe, okay?
You're seeing the spread of the far right as well. This anti-migrant hate. I don't disagree with you, Gary.
So you're telling me if Israel asked Germany to take the Palestinians as refugees, Germany will say no?
We have a bunch of Arab, stooges in this region who will do whatever the Americans tell them to do. It's much more likely that they'll be shoved into Arab countries. Okay.
There's no option to shove them to Arab countries.
No, wait.
It was Egypt, and Egypt didn't.
Because Sisi said no. Who's Sisi? He literally exists, because of U.S. largesse.
100%.
Okay. So plus, by the way, Egypt doth protest too much because we have seen signs. We have had leaked photographs of major infrastructure bills taking place across that border inside Egypt. So, Europe's not the option. It's going to be the Arab world. The Arab world is going to struggle with something much bigger. I think the narrative on this should be like, well, if you want to save Gazans, move them into Israel.
That will be Europe. They will take them from the pier. If this war didn't end, if it takes more time, they will take them from there to Cyprus. Cyprus, there is military bases in the south, British military bases. That's also inside Cyprus, in the southern Cyprus, which is also controlled by Greece. And from there to Greece, in Greece there's thousands of islands. Till now they use them for such things. And from Greece to Italy and to Germany and to other places. As I see you and you see me.
I think maybe you will see a smaller amount of Palestinians, because you do need to measure, politics here a lot. And what Sharmin is saying is completely correct, because there's going to be huge pushback in European countries. Maybe I will see Canada. Maybe I see more actually. These what you brought up in Egypt is what I wanted to bring up as well. That they do have these buffers and that is supposed to take somewhere along like maybe 500,000 or 300,000 displaced. These security zones that they built on the border on the Sinai desert. That when they built this is when they all of a sudden they started getting money, from the IMF, from the EU, from Qatar. From Saudi Arabia, from the UAE. Just like all of a sudden the Cairo's coffers are like these, like Scrooge McDuck. You see Sisi diving into the money pit. So you can never discount that it's just going to be these Arab countries, For all you know, they'll just push more into Lebanon or something. Although with Lebanon is much more difficult because of Hezbollah. But you have Jordan, you have Egypt, and you do have Europe, and you do have Canada, and you do have the US, and more likely than not, they're probably going to end up on like a holding facility somewhere.
But no, that would be unacceptable. And, no. But I do think this should, bring us to the sudden increase of military activity on Israel's northern front, Hezbollah. Hezbollah has showcased a new weapon this weekend. Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of the organization, will be speaking today at 5 p.m. Beirut time. We have seen a number of Hezbollah hits at Israel's Iron Dome batteries. We have seen them basically raise Kiryat Shmona, an Israeli residential area, of course empty, right? Raise entire agricultural lands and houses.
Exactly what they're doing in the south of Lebanon.
Exactly what they're doing in the south of Lebanon. Exactly what the Israelis are doing in Gaza too. Making it uninhabitable so people can't return. And it's interesting because just in the last week, there was this bizarre news that developed that Israeli settlers in the Galilee who have been displaced by the war on the northern front, are so annoyed at the fact that Netanyahu keeps kicking the can down the road on when they can return, that they have decided on May 15th in a couple of days, which is Israel's quote-unquote Independence Day, to declare the Galilee independent of the state of Israel, to secede from the Israeli state and government, create their own government. Now, of course, we don't know if this is a PR stunt or not to, of course, get Israelis more rallying behind their cause, the fact that they've been displaced. Israel's playing on way too many fronts now. You remember how this whole narrative about we created the state of Israel so we will never have to depend on anyone else for our security, that Jews/Zionists will be able to secure themselves now that we have a state. Literally, Israel cannot go it alone. They cannot go it alone in any sphere. Any operational theater. It's American weapons, it's American defensive capabilities, it's American money, taxpayer money, of course, the UK, France, Germany, and others, and Jordan, yes, the Arab fig leaf. And I think one of the reasons Hezbollah escalated is because we were moving towards an invasion of Rafah, which is one of the early red lines. Okay, if you severely incapacitate the Palestinian resistance, if you move and displace Palestinians or look to be moving to displace them out of Gaza, we're gonna get into a hot war. And so that's what's happened in the last few days. And today we're gonna see an explanation, I think, from Nasrallah as to why this is happening and where it's likely to go.
Exactly. So because I just want to to your point about Israel fighting on different fronts. So yes, Hezbollah has seen a very steady escalation, right? Nothing big, really. Just like whatever the Israelis do to us, we kind of return the favor. And so Israel, when they were supposed to go into Rafah, where, the last two Hamas battalions are, not even Yahya Sinwar is in Rafah. Now they're saying he never left Khan Yunis. And it's supposed to be like Rafah is, where everyone is now. All the leadership is in Rafah. So when they were supposed to go in there, it was supposed, we claim victory against Hamas. Yay. We go to the north. We claim victory against Hezbollah. And we're back to the terms. We're back to being the strongest military in this region. That's beyond a pipe dream at this point, because Hezbollah hasn't even activated fully. Hezbollah, as I said, there have been, escalatory measures, but we haven't seen the full force of Hezbollah. And we are still seeing Hamas, the Qassam brigades, the Al-Quds brigades, Mujahideen brigades, etc. All of these, Palestinian resistance factions in Gaza reignite, right? These were supposed to be defeated. This was the narrative. This is what the West was saying. And now you even have Antony Blinken, the U.S. State Secretary, saying that essentially the way that Israel is conducting this war is going to leave a vacuum. And that they don't have a plan for this vacuum. You're essentially going to have Hamas. Again, that's what he says. And that's what we've been saying for months now, right? That Israel, there's no win for them. At the very least, in the terms, in the strategic goals that they set at the beginning, they have achieved none of them.
So, what is Israel's plan over this last week, and particularly over the weekend where things escalated on multiple fronts? So, officially, Israel has said that in the last 24 hours, 50 Israeli soldiers have been injured. Of course, Israelis are only ever injured. They never die.
They're injured by wasps.
They're injured by wasps, yes.
They commit suicide.
They commit suicide and they're injured by wasps, or they fall off of buildings, or they have heart attacks when they're 32-year-olds going on a military run, but they don't die in combat with Palestinian resistance forces. That is a fact. So I think so we have a big number of Israeli troops that have been injured, and then we have of course the Rafah narrative. American universities, everyone's rallying against this Rafah operation. Yahya Sinwar is, we're told, no longer in Rafah. He's in Khan Yunis now.
Okay. They say he was never in Rafah.
Never in Rafah. And no, not only that, the Palestinian sources are saying Yahya Sinwar is actually often not in the tunnels, but actively working the Palestinian resistance operations on the ground, much like Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Quds Force commander, was wont to do. So now we have, instead of dropping leaflets on Rafah, 150,000 Gazans start leaving from Rafah, and then suddenly Jabalia in the north of Gaza City, in the north of Gaza, is on fire. And, a Palestinian journalist on the ground tweeted that after months of not firing rockets, what's happening in Jabalia and the refugee camp there represents a whole new level of Palestinian resistance we've not seen in 8 months. So not only are they not incapacitated, they're coming back bigger and stronger than ever. Israeli tanks have been taken out left, right, and center, I think forcing Israeli tanks to remove from one of the theaters, the hottest theater.
Was it Zaytun?
In Zaytun, yes. The battles are large, and the Palestinian resistance has started firing rockets again towards Ashkelon at Sderot, which is the big Israeli Kirkuk settlement on the Gaza envelope, from the ground next to the tanks. Now he points out that Jabalia camp is considered the Al-Qassam, which is Hamas's military wing, Al-Qassam's fortress in the Gaza Strip. For about 20 years, Israeli forces have not been able to enter the Jabalia camp. And now, even in this war, where everything ostensibly is on their side militarily, they cannot enter the mainstreams of the camp. The Al-Qassam brigades, which is responsible for Jabalia camp, is called the Caliph's Brigade. It's considered the fiercest fighting battalion among all the Hamas resistance battalions. So the question for me is, did Israel decide to disperse the fighting, pretend it was Rafah and then go elsewhere? Because as even American commentators and experts have pointed out, what's the point of this? You know, you get rid of Hamas in the north and Hamas pops out in the south. You go to the south, they pop up in the north. It's like this ping pong thing.
This is the most violent game of whack-a-mole.
Or, yes, most violent game of whack-a-mole, exactly. Or is it the resistance ping-ponging Israel away from Rafah?
I think so. I think it's just them showing that they're here, you know. It's like the Palestinian resistance has been very strategic.
It's not just here, it's here in a massive way, more than they've seen before. I mean, they were saving all their efforts. It's not a loss for Israel. It is a humiliating, existential defeat.
Little facts about Gaza. So what's happening in Gaza is indeed American. First, Gaza is flat. There's no mountains. It's not like what happened in Afghanistan or even what's happening in South Lebanon.
To take cover.
There's no place. There's no mountains. There's not even hills. And the other side is the sea. And to the south also we have Egypt, which is not allowing anything to pass through the strip.
Unless you pay them a big price.
$10,000.
Yeah.
So first, Gaza is 365 kilometers square, or 140 square miles. This is the same or very similar to the area of Las Vegas. So imagine 7 months you're being bombed every day, every second, and you live in a flat area. Until now, you are able to fight back and to fire missiles. It's America. They are not only fighting the Israelis. They are fighting the Israelis. They are fighting the UK, Germany, France, the United States behind the scenes. Of course, Israelis are using all the satellites of the United States or the intelligence of the United States. Any bombs they need, everything they want is in their hands. And yet the Palestinian resistance are still fighting back. And we have to know that the Palestinian resistance, they are not an army or they are not professional fighters.
They're not a large force.
They are not a large force, and they don't have sophisticated equipment.
They are now a freaking army. They are now an army. What?
They don't have the equipment. And for instance, when you see a fighter...
You have equip armies, but the thing is, they make the most of it. They make the most of having nothing, but are literally defeating the, greatest fighting force in West Asia.
That's why I'm telling you it's American.
It's not a miracle. It's a resistance, sweetie.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's what I was saying a couple of minutes ago, that they are so good at strategy.
Yeah.
They are so good at strategy that having such a small force, they can perform this miracle. They can perform this, 7 months, more than 7 months into a genocidal war. Jabalia was also where they were dropping bombs on this residential building, when they killed hundreds at once, Israel. It's flattened land. So the strategy is not only about what the fighting that is happening now, it's before. It's the strategy for October 7. It's the strategy for the tunnels. That, Haaretz also had this report last week that they said that Israel essentially stopped gathering intelligence on Gaza in 2021. So when October 7 happened, they went into Gaza, we're going to pummel Hamas and we're going to blah, blah, blah. With intel that was 2 years, probably more old and erroneous in so many cases, because everything that we have been seeing over the past 7 months has been, yes, the massacre, the mass murder of civilians, a full-blown genocide, but also the embarrassing defeat of the Israeli army. And I think with that, we can wrap up for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe, to leave a like, to share this video, to follow us on Instagram, on Telegram, on X. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a donation in our Patreon for the Cradle News Roundup. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.